Hi, and welcome to episode 48 of the ChessTDD series here. What I decided to do for this episode was actually move on to the long-standing backlog instead of dreaming up something new to do. So, having handled en passant to some degree, for the most part, I think there's still something I need to throw in there and come back to about removing the pawn from the board following en passant. But anyway, having finished that, I said, let's go into the backlog and tackle castling. And this is going to prove to be deceptively hard. At least I found it that way because it had been such a long time since I'd looked at king movement and going back. I guess I'll say it this way. I'd been in sort of a rut of doing the pawn stuff. So it took me a little while to remember how some of these other classes interacted with one another. I think not just that I was dealing with pawn, but memory serves for the last 7 or 8 episodes. I think the only class I've really been touching outside of the acceptance test class is board. And this is going to have us going back into king and kind of taking a dive through the unit tests also. So strange as it sounds to say on such with such infrequencies I'm doing this, it's actually been quite a while. It's probably like, June or something since I was last doing that. Versus if I were working on this project sort of contiguously, all this might have been done over the course of a week. So back to the present, what I'm doing here is I'm going to set up a chessboard where I just have the white king and then this rook. And what I'm going to do is say that the white king, neither one of these pieces is moved. And if you don't remember or know, the way that castling works is that the white king can move to 1-7 in this scenario. And then the rook flips over to the other side and winds up at 1-6. That's a castle. You can castle, and I should probably look this up. I'm going on my own memory. But you can castle if neither piece has moved and if moving the king doesn't put the king through check. So there are no black pieces. There's nothing to put me in check. So that's not a problem here. So I should be able to move the king to 2-7-1. Now, I gave a little thought kind of as I was doing this, and it distracted me a little bit, maybe slowed me down. But the castle is a unique move in all of chess because 2 pieces move. It's the only time that happens. So why is it the king moving to that 1-7 and not the rook moving to 1-6? And I kind of quickly solved that problem for myself by realizing that the rook could move to 1-6 without involving the king at all. So I know that if the king is moving a distance that's more than 1 square away, then I'm doing a castle. So that's a little bit of, engineering planning ahead. I can tell that this is this unique castle move if the king is doing something weird. So what I decided to do at this point that you haven't seen for a while, but I'm getting back to it here, is that I've written this failing acceptance test, and in this case, I don't think there's any. Well, I shouldn't say it this way. There certainly probably is something I can do to easily make the acceptance test pass, but I've got a nice surface area with the king. Unlike en passant, where I was kind of getting too deep and there's this class that needs to be refactored and everything, with king, I need to go in here and change the moves that king exudes in its get moves from. Because I do recall that the original design goal here with this get moves from at the piece level was that I wanted to have this radiate all possible moves for the piece. And then at the board level, we'd be figuring out, are those legal given where other pieces are on the board? So I know that I need to add a new way of doing this, a new move from this method. And it's a public method on a class I can get at, so let's get at it with a unit test instead of kind of going at it indirectly just through the acceptance test. And then I'm doing a little bit of housekeeping here where I see that the original suite of king tests was in my old way of doing this, and now I've moved to this new way of organizing the unit tests. Lesson to be learned here is, I've probably covered it before, but the Boy Scout approach is you're not going to slay all of the dragons in your code base in one shot, but always leave the code a little bit better than you found it. And so what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to go in and create a folder for all these different sorts of tests and break up, knight test and bishop test and all of those into the new style of doing things. But what I can do is at least move this king test that I have into the folder and then add this new context mentioning style of test to king tests. So I feel good, even though I'm not doing everything that could possibly be done. I'm doing something. I'm making the code better, and I'm being productive, and that's kind of a nice way to delineate between, how much time should you be spending refactoring and cleaning up versus how much time should you be spending, delivering features to your users. And I think there's a balance to be struck. Obviously, your users, and especially if you've got like project managers with Gantt charts and such, they're going to say, I don't care about anything. Don't clean up the code. Only deliver me new features. That's understandable, but as a professional, you shouldn't let them make you do that because they don't know what they're talking about, and you will not be able to continue to deliver features at the same pace if you make a growing mess. So if someone is telling you that, this is going to sound horrible, but if you're having the whip cracked on you, don't ever clean anything up, just do it anyway. That's what Boy Scouting is. Nobody's looking over your shoulder for the entirety of the day while you're programming, so don't get caught up on quixotic refactoring missions and deliver nothing of business value. But if you see something nearby, spend 5 minutes cleaning it up. It pays off in the long run, trust me. And by the way, as long as I'm being opinionated, if you find yourself in a place where they're telling you, no, don't spend 5 minutes here and there refactoring to keep your code maintainable, I would go out on a limb and recommend that you find a different place to work. That's not a good environment. Anyway, back to the present. I am setting up a context here, and I'd kind of forgotten how little the pieces know, so there was some flailing around here before I figured out, king isn't going to know anything about rooks or board position. You're going to tell it its board position, and it's going to spit things back to you. So really all I'm going to test here is that I should have one additional move, because this is the unit test I'm going to write in the hopes of also I get the unit test to pass with my standard TDD approach, and hypothesize that once I get this unit test to pass, it will also fix the acceptance test. So I am referring, I think, back to these more recently created pawn context unit test classes that I've created just to remember some of the tricks and idioms I had here. And there it's starting to come back to me that I had defined this moves from XY as a handy piece of shorthand, which is basically the entire context of this is going to be, I have a king at square such and such, and I'm going to make assertions about what moves should be available for that king. I think I don't do this now, but I may do it in the next episode. I think I may remove the given first move because that's a flag I can easily set on the king, and I'll probably want to assert about what it can or can't do if it's not its first move. So in here, I'm going to talk about, well, it should have these two additional castling moves if it hasn't moved, but if it has moved, it shouldn't have those castling moves. It also gets a little weird, and this is something just to bear in mind in general. As your code base matures, it gets a little more difficult, especially if you have complex interleavings, which is one of the things that's really interesting about this domain. There's tons of that and one-off rules and exceptions. It's a fascinating domain. But as that evolves, you start to, when you think about do the simplest thing that could possibly work, in the beginning that's easy because you don't have any passing tests that are baggage for you. But for me to do the simplest thing that could possibly work, that means that I have to do the simplest thing to get my test to pass. and all the other tests to pass. So you'll see me increasingly do things that you think maybe that's not quite the simplest thing I can think of to do. And I might be wrong. Maybe I should try the absolute dead simplest thing and watch it stay red. But in some of these cases, I know that there's, hundreds of unit tests and acceptance tests in this code base now. So I might have to put in a conditional or something. I might have to do things that seem a little complicated just because of all of the baggage I have from my test suite. And I hate to call it baggage, but in this context, that's what it is. I mean, in most contexts, that baggage is your safety net, that you're not screwing things up. But strictly looking at it from the perspective of what's the simplest thing I can do to get the test I just wrote to pass, along with all the other tests, well, that's baggage. In the moment, I just want to get that one test green. And it can be frustrating if getting that test green means a bunch of other ones go red and I'm not doing it right, so I have to keep at it until they all go green. So if I were new to this, and maybe I should show an example, since it's an instructional series, I'll see about that, but in the beginning, I would recommend that you do the simplest thing, watch it go red, and then realize, now I'm making this other test red, so, you're gradually introducing complexity. Because if you do what I'm doing, which is just understand and have a feel for all your tests, you can wind up doing what I did a couple of episodes ago, which is having a bit of code in there that you can delete and everything stays green, and that's also not good. So the long and short of it is that it gets complicated as you have more requirements that get added on over the course of time. So what you're seeing here is a code base that's maturing and having stuff tacked on right before your eyes, and you're seeing what that complexity looks like and the importance of, trying to have a decoupled design, and also of trying to keep the code in a state where you can make changes and you're never too long between green. So even though I have all of this baggage, I generally don't spend much time in the red. So I'm figuring out things I can do to get it to pass. And then going back and refactoring, or, in this case, kind of pressing on, but knowing that I will later without too much trouble. Okay, so back to the present. What I'm doing here is, again, you're seeing me add in this conditional, and this is a good example of what I'm talking about. I'm saying if we haven't moved, then return this this other coordinate. Now, why am I doing that? I mean, shouldn't I just try and not just return this coordinate, but if we have not moved, take everything we've done so far and then union it with this new coordinate? Shouldn't I just try adding the union on to the return value as is and seeing what happens? Probably, if I'm going to be purist about it, yes. Because then what I would do is I would see, that doesn't work for these 20 test classes or whatever. I know that if I do that, I'm going to have a whole bunch of red tests that will just trigger me to add that conditional anyway. And this is what I mean about kind of walking a fine line. So in the way I did it here, I'm still getting 3 red tests. And the difference here is that now I'm getting these red tests because the tests are actually now wrong. They're outdated. So for a piece that hasn't moved, I should have 6, not 5 moves. And again, I'm counting the moves that the king that should be returned for the king, and now these tests are wrong. If I had left out that conditional and let the oodles of failing tests drive me, what would have happened is I would have just immediately, after seeing all the red tests, added the conditional. So there's no easy answer there. I do a lot of things by feel, so you'll see me maybe approach it differently depending on my mood and depending on the situation. That makes it a little bit hard for me to give you concrete advice all the time because I don't. I am context dependent. I have a lot of feel for it. I don't have a strict playbook of, do this, do this, do this. I do try to familiarize myself with the disciplines, and when learning this approach, I did it the way that I'm explaining, which is really to the letter. absolutely always doing as little as possible and letting the test guide me. To each his or her own. So what's happening here is that I burned a little bit of time. I don't know why I didn't quite figure this out right away, but the acceptance test... I'm sorry. No, I don't remember. This is funny because I actually just wrote this code, but I was sort of concentrating and trying to figure out what was wrong with that acceptance test. I think that I was assuming there was a king on one side of the... Oh, okay, yes, I remember this. There was a king on one side of the board, the white side, that was surrounded by pieces, and then there was the king on the black side, which was the king I was actually interested in. I think when I saw that test failing, I was assuming that the problem was it was returning for the white king that was surrounded by pieces, that the white king could move to 7-1. And so I was starting to think, like, wait, I need to make sure castle's not allowed when there is a friendly piece at that square. And so I was kind of doing stuff here with what's allowed and what isn't, and expecting it to go green, but it didn't. So I kind of rebooted and mentally and looked at it again and discovered, I just need to update that test, because for all of these, and this is a nice thing about the black and white kings mirroring each other, for both kings, the castle moves are starting point +2 in the X direction, and starting point -3 in the X direction. So what was going on here was that I was thinking about the white king, but I had a test involving the black king that was going red. So in the end, as you'll see here shortly, I believe I figured it out pretty quickly here. Well, quickly from this point, that I just needed to add another line to that acceptance test's moves expected. And so once I figured that out, the next thing I did was fairly quickly put into place the -3, the castling in the other direction. If I haven't explained it up to this point, you can castle in both directions. Although now, if memory serves, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking off the top, I actually think I got the movement for the king. I don't remember how it works, castling the long way. It's not something I do as a player. I think the king actually goes to 3. I will have to look that up and then fix it in the next episode if I'm wrong, so I will make a note to do that here. But even if I'm wrong, it'll just involve changing the logic by factor, 1x square. And let's see. Yeah, so you can also see I was adding the rook on the other side of the board in there. I'm doing that now because I will probably eventually write a test that doesn't let the castling happen unless there is a rook there. Because if those rooks are not present, then the king shouldn't be allowed to make the castling move. So rather than having to screw with that test again later, I figured I'd set it up in the happy path scenario now, because that is intended to be a happy path test. So basically, what I'm doing now is just asserting that I can castle in the other direction. The more I think about it, the more I'm pretty sure this is wrong, and that either way the king moves 2, and it's just that the rook moves further, castling in the other direction. I will look it up and set it straight. So this should go relatively quickly, and what I'm expecting to see is that I have to, do the same thing and correct another 3 or 4 tests. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the test I just wrote to pass, and then see what the fallout is from there. And that is going to involve adding another coordinate in this list that I'm generating. Now this function is getting a little ugly. excuse me, this method. So I should probably come back and refactor this here before too much longer. That may happen in the next episode since I'm going to be back in here. One thing I'll definitely be doing is adding some more unit tests around board and perhaps around king. I think because of the check I put in here to keep more existing tests from blowing up, that I don't need to tease out with TDD the right and wrong of what gets returned if the king has moved at the unit level. I want to write those tests at the unit level, but I don't think they'll go red. Just because of that conditional that's already in there. But once I surround it with those unit tests, I'll be a little more confident when I go and refactor that method that I'm starting not to like. So now I'm just going and cleaning up the mess here. Now there should be a, once I add the rook, there should be this ability to castle in the other direction. So what's happened here isn't that I've broken a test, it's that the test itself needs to be updated. It's out of date. Same thing here. I need to be able to castle to the left as well. I didn't write that scenario in initially because I just wanted to get the castling in one direction working. And I believe it's the same thing. And you'll see me hesitate here too. It was getting late in the episode, or I might have started to reason about this, but I'm paused here because I'm wondering what the value of this test class and test is. There's one test in here, and all I'm doing is saying that there should be some number of moves for the Black King. I wish I could remember why I wrote this. Maybe it was to stub out for this scenario later where I'm going to be having this move, but I saw two very similar tests in two different classes, so I was toying with the idea of actually deleting this whole test class and reasoning that it's just not adding a lot of value. The thing that wound up swaying me not to do it was that that one was a test of board and the other one was a test of king, so I left it. And that's going to be it for this episode. I decided to call it done that the king now has castling capability such as it is. We need additional testing around it. And as soon as I'm done recording the audio here, I'll also put a card in here to check and make sure I'm getting the castling in the long direction correct. So castling is not perfect yet, but it's there. It just needs to be fleshed out and finished. And that's going to be it for this episode. Oh, and then there's the biggie about making it so I can't castle through check. That's its own card. So I'm going to check this into GitHub, and then I'm going to call it an episode. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.